Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with all of you at the Moss Park Armory. My name is Deepak Anand. I'm the Parliamentary Assistant to Minister Monte McNaughton, the Minister of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skill Development. Here again, I'm pleased to join Minister in making another important announcement. Since day one, our ministry has been dedicated to listening to hard-working workers of Ontario and creating opportunities for men and women our province. Our ability to be safe and thrive here in Ontario is guaranteed by the efforts of the heroes who have served and who are currently serving in the Canadian military. However, it is often we don't hear about these folks and are able to thank them for the work they do and how important they are. That is why our government has worked closely alongside the brave veterans and reservists of our province to deliver results for them. I'm proud to be working alongside with the Minister and all our partners present here today as we continue our efforts to make good on our mission to work for workers. Without further delay, I would like to welcome the champion of workers, our Honourable Minister Monte McNaughton, to make this important announcement. Thank you so much.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today for a really important and meaningful announcement. A tremendous thanks to Colonel John McEwen, Commander of 32 Canadian Brigade Group, and everyone here at Moss Park Armory for hosting us here this morning. On behalf of Premier Ford and our government, thank you for your service to Canada. It's also great to be here with a good friend who you're going to hear from momentarily, former Chief of the Defence Staff, retired General Rick Hillier. Thank you, General, for being here today. And I'd also like to thank Naval Captain Batty, whose invaluable contributions in discussions with our government helped lead to today's very important announcement. Also welcome to Nick Booth, CEO of the True Patriot Love Foundation, Rick Seymour, CEO of Together We Stand Foundation, and James Hogarth, who's the new National Executive Director of Helmets to Hard Hats, as well as I'd like to welcome Jeff Musson, Executive Director of Coding for Veterans. These organizations are ensuring that veterans can transfer their military skills and experience to well-paying, meaningful, and in-demand jobs where they can continue to serve their community in new ways. Recently, my good friend Joe Maloney, and a champion for our military veterans across Canada, told me that he was retiring from Helmets to Hard Hats. Since he founded this organization, they, along with Canada's building trade unions and employers, have helped thousands of veterans begin meaningful careers in the skilled trades, building construction projects from coast to coast to coast. His tireless efforts have made a lasting impact on these vets, their families, and our country. On behalf of the Government of Ontario, I want to thank Joe Maloney for his service for building Helmets to Hard Hats here in Canada and in the United States. And to James Hogarth, who's here today, as I mentioned, I look forward to working with you. Our men and women in uniform are heroes, each and every one of them. They put their lives on the line to protect us. By stepping up during search and rescue operations, natural disasters, ice storms, wildfires, international deployments, and other major events and conflicts. To the over 5,500 reservists in Ontario, thank you. You are shining examples of service over self. And this year is particularly important. 100 years ago, the Royal Canadian Naval Volunteer Reserve was created. Next year marks the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force Reserve, a century of outstanding service to Canada, a century of selflessly giving, often at great peril to themselves and their brothers and sisters in arms. Packing up and leaving to go on a mission isn't easy for military reservists, especially if they are just starting a new job. And returning to their job afterwards, especially if their mission is a difficult one or leads to trauma, can be even more challenging. Reservists are there for us in our time of need. We must do our part and be there for them. Today, I'm pleased to announce that our government will be introducing legislation to make it easier for reservists to serve our country and ensure they have the time they need after to recover. This includes protecting the jobs of reservists who need to leave work immediately for a domestic emergency, even if it's their first day at a new job. Anyone who is willing to drop everything to help their neighbours should be rewarded and not punished. It's that simple. Our government is also introducing job protection so that reservists have time to recover after their deployment. This new leave would cover treatment and rehabilitation for both physical and mental health injuries or trauma. Of the 40,000 Canadian soldiers who deployed to Afghanistan, nearly 1 in 7 developed a mental health injury. Soldiers' mental health is no less important than their physical health. We are standing up for our frontline heroes while they protect us, and we are giving them, most importantly, peace of mind that their civilian jobs will be waiting for them when they are ready to come back. These newest set of changes will cover all military reservists, including those in military skills training and those stationed abroad. We are proud to make our reservist leave the most flexible and comprehensive in all of Canada. These changes are part of legislation we'll introduce in the coming days, together with other measures I've recently announced, like expanding cancer coverage for our firefighters and improving employment services to help people on social assistance find work and build purpose-driven lives. We are stepping up to support, protect, and attract our best and brightest to the Canadian Armed Forces. We recognize the tremendous contributions these brave men and women, many of whom are here today, make in serving Canada. Thank you very much, and now it's my great honor to introduce General Rick Hillier, former Chief of the Defence Staff for Canada. General Hillier really needs no introduction. He is a hero. He's been steadfast in serving our troops and Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and it really has been a personal honor of mine to be able to work with General Hillier in helping those in Ukraine because of that unprovoked war by Putin last year. So, General, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, everyone.
Minister, thank you. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and I really want to do very quickly just 4 things. Number one is I want to actually say thank you to Premier Ford, to Minister McNaughton, and to the Parliamentary Secretary here, Deepak Anand, for their leadership in making this initiative occur. And the initiative is a wonderful thing to do. It's not the complete sort of cure for everything that we need in the reserves and support to Canada and Canadians who serve in our nation's uniform, but it is a wonderful step to take, and it is a wonderful initiative. And these initiatives simply do not occur without leadership that is persistent, that is visionary, that actually gets things done, because bureaucracies can stifle and kill, and getting this legislation introduced is wonderful. And Minister, directly I want to say thank you to you and Parliamentary Secretary Anand, and pass my thanks, my heartfelt thanks to Premier Doug Ford, who I know has been supportive of this one. That's the first thing I wanted to do. The second thing I wanted to do is just to underscore the impact of an initiative like this. And yeah, the actions are important, but in a time frame in our nation when many men and women in uniform and those who are contemplating joining, whether a reservist or a regular force, don't feel entirely appreciated or supported, and sometimes feel put upon by the rest of the country and leave the burdens to be carried by those in uniform and their families alone, an initiative like this, almost no matter what, has a powerful, positive impact. And you can't sort of over-describe the value of that impact. It's powerful, it's wonderful, and it incites people to do their job, stand a little bit taller, be a little bit more proud, and actually stay a little longer if they were talking about taking their release, or maybe even join the Canadian Forces if they were already thinking about that, or maybe even think about joining the Canadian Forces if they never did. The initiative just by itself is absolutely impactful, and I don't want to miss that part of it. And point number 3 was, I'll say, even though the impact is incredible just from the initiative, the actual measures are pretty important too. And you know, hundreds of thousands of Canadians, our sons and daughters, have joined to serve in the reserves, have gone on operations domestically, gone on operations internationally, responded to emergencies in Canada's and Canadians' darkest hours, and they need the support that when they do that, their jobs are not going to disappear. When they come home, they're still going to have a career and a profession and a job and an appointment to go to, and that if during the operation they should suffer mental injury, physical injury, or need time to rehabilitate and recovery, their jobs are still going to be there and be protected. And yeah, there is a responsibility for each individual to talk to their employers and make sure there are no surprises, but when there's a domestic emergency in particular, those young men and women will stand by to serve immediately, and now they're going to be sure that their jobs are protected. And I think that's absolutely fundamentally incredibly important. And just think of what the reservists mean to Canada and the Canadian Armed Forces. I mean, you look behind here at the 48th Highlanders battle honors. I mean, really it is the history of our great nation. I mean, this regiment was formed, and there are a bunch of men and women over here in the back who look so good and so proud to be wearing the uniform and their regimental badges. This regiment was helped form Canada in the 1800s, you know, fought in World War I against tyranny. And you look at the battle honors. Look at this. Ypres, the Second Battle of Ypres in April of 1915, where this regiment was in the Canadian Division. There was only one division fighting at that time. And in April of 1915 was when the Germans attacked with poison gas for the first time in warfare. And the Canadian Division stood tall, including the men of the 48th Highlanders at that time. The British Army commander said, I actually sensed that the end was in sight. The Germans were going to break through. They'd head to the Channel. They'd cut off the British Expeditionary Force and the French forces and the Belgian forces there. But he said, the Canadians stood tall. Just think about that, what an impact we had in our history from that perspective. And then they went to the Somme in 1916, and what lessons they didn't learn in the Second Battles of Ypres in April of 1915, they sure learned in the brutal mincemeat operations on the Somme in 1916. And then they applied those operations at Vimy Ridge on the 9th of April 1917, when Canada did, with the aid of those men from the 48th, did what no other nation could do. They took Vimy Ridge, and then they carried on to use those lessons with their sacrifice, with their courage, and with their skill in the pursuit to Mons, where they were taking on almost one-half of the German army to end World War I. And they carried that awesome tradition forward. These men and women who were citizens and had joined to serve our nation, they carried that awesome service and sacrifice forward. Thousands of them joining the regiment, going ashore at Pechino in Sicily on the 10th of July, 1943, fighting through Sicily, fighting through mainland Italy, and some of the toughest fighting ever recorded in history. I mean, you look at the battles of Ortona on their battle honors here, and think about how brutal that fight was during Christmas of 1943, and going up the mountain at Cassino. And if you've ever been to Italy and looked at Monte Cassino, and the dominant ground that the defenders, the Germans, occupied and that dominated the Liri Valley, you just marvel at the courage, at the persistence, at the no-reverse mentality those men and women had. They were all reservists. They joined to serve our nation, and they've joined since in Korea and missions around the world during the 50s and 60s and 70s, and they've done every operation that we've ever been involved in, whether it's the Red River Valley flood in 1997 or the ice storm in 1998, Afghanistan, of course, they've served. And they deserve the protection when they sacrifice and serve for Canada that the legislation will actually give them. Lastly, I'd like to say, after thanking those men and women for what they do and the fact that this legislation is in support of them, is to say I hope this acts as an incentive to other provincial governments. I hope that every single province and territory across Canada and the federal government follow through on this initiative and enact similar legislation to make sure that we look after those citizen soldiers, as the minister called them, heroes all, who serve Canada and who do it so very, very well. Most Canadians don't know how extremely fortunate we are to have them serve in uniform. I want to thank those who are here in uniform for their service, and thank in general those who are not, and say, again, thank you to the Ontario government for the leadership in this kind of initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much again. Thank you for hosting us here today, and to the men and women in uniform here today, thank you for everything you're doing for all of us, and we'll have your back. Thank you. With that, we can take questions, or we'll be around afterwards for media questions as well. Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, we do have one question here. We do ask that you come up to the microphone, announce where you're from, and it'll be one question, one follow-up.
Thank you. Good morning. Steve Ryan from CP24. Can I briefly, General, ask you, sir, first off, thank you for your service. And can you speak about your decades as a military leader when it comes to an initiative like this? What does it do, you touched on this, to the morale of those in the military? And when you've got a government that is perceived to be in support of those soldiers, how does that affect the military in general?
Hey, sorry, your first name is?
Steve. Steve Ryan.
Thank you for that question. Look, I mean, I could talk for hours. In fact, I probably will on exactly that issue. You know, I remember when we doubled, for example, the budget in the Canadian Forces after I became the Chief of Defence Staff with the government there, and all of a sudden the men and women in uniform and their families and those who wanted to join or were contemplating joining the armed forces, how all of a sudden you were taller. You walk with a more of a spring in your step. You were more proud to wear a uniform than ever before because you felt the support of a nation. And we became, I think, again, Canada's armed forces as opposed to simply the armed forces residing in Canada. And those kind of initiatives that, like we see here today, they're not going to make that complete, but they sure are awesome steps towards exactly that thing. Young men and women will feel prouder. They have the support of their provincial government and therefore the support of the great province of Ontario. It's going to make them feel prouder about serving, knowing that they are respected, knowing that they have credibility with the province of Ontario. It makes you want to stay when otherwise you might want to leave. It gives you a little bit more persistence when, you know, times get tough and you're on that mission or that training opportunity when you really could call it quit and you're cold and wet and tired and hungry, but maybe you just feel a little bit better because of that. And then maybe you stay, as like I say, and the retention improves, but also people across the province will get the message that you're supported, that they're supported, and so will their families. And so not only will you get retention that will, I think, be a little tiny bit easier, maybe a lot, you'll also get recruiting that will improve also, because people will see it's an honorable profession still. Our nation wants men and women in uniform, especially as reservists here in Ontario, and the Ontario government is part of that great support package, and it's evident in the legislation that's going forward today.
Thank you for that. And if I could follow up with the Minister very, very quickly. Important initiative. Why now? And is there teeth in this legislation, or will there be teeth in this legislation for those employers that decide that they're not going to abide by your rules?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I want to begin by saying that I believe the overwhelming majority of employers will ensure that they're there for our men and women in uniform. I mean, that's the Canadian way. But this legislation that we are going to bring forward in the next number of days will ensure that this is enshrined in law, that these people have that job-protected leave that they deserve, whether it's from a mental and physical component, or if they go, you know, on day one of a job and serve because there's a wildfire in Northern Ontario or flooding that's happening. So, of course, there'll be penalties if employers don't follow the law, but I can say I really do believe that employers do step up time and time again to support our men and women and troops.
And just to follow up on that, why now? Why is this happening now? Why didn't it happen before? It's just curious.
Yeah, no, this is our third Working for Workers legislation that we're going to be bringing forward. This is actually building on job-protected leave that we brought in last year. So, for example, in our legislation last year, we allowed military reservists to leave their job for training, and their job would be there for them when they come back. So this is, again, continuing to build. Everything we're doing, these worker-friendly initiatives that I'm bringing forward, it's because we're hearing about this when we're out talking to people. I think of, you know, the voices here that told us that these changes are important. I think of, you know, the presumptive coverage for firefighters that we're going to bring forward. That's because we've listened to our firefighters who are heroes serving our families. I think of the legislation that we're going to bring forward to ensure that bathrooms are clean and safe on construction sites for the 600,000 men and women building those projects for us. It's all because under the leadership of Premier Ford, we're out in communities, we're listening to these ideas and making small but major benefits to individuals across the province. General, if you want to add something.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you for that follow-on. I just make a comment about potential negativity from the issue, and I've had some experience working with other countries actually who have legislation that is similar, and yeah, the issue was always there. But here's what I would say, and I alluded to this earlier on when I said, you know, some of the responsibility also rests with the individual, not to be, you know, to give a surprise to their employer. And yeah, we know it's tough when all of a sudden you've got somebody doing a job and that space is going to be empty. So, you know, literally months out, you want to start working with your employer to say, I'm going to be going on a mission, if you have that kind of a lead time, and be able to prepare that employer so that they can carry on, temporarily fill, or spread the workload in a variety of other ways. But also then I would say to the employers, think of what you're going to get back from this investment. You're going to take one of those young kids over here and send them on a 6-month deployment on a mission around the world. They're going to get leadership training. They're going to come back and want to be leading your team. They're going to work with the best teams in the world, and they're going to want to come back to your company and recreate that teamwork, which is what every single organization in the world needs. And those young men and women, they go off and they sharpen their sense of humor, and they bring that sense of humor back to the workplace. And they go off and they work under stress, and they bring that ability to work under stress back to the workplace. And they go off and they have missions which are no-fail, and they bring that kind of attitude, that discipline, that approach back to the company that employs them. And so just think of what you get for that kind of investment, and I would encourage employers to be thinking that. Hopefully we'll couple this with an educational program which can help actually lay that out for employers. And again, I would say to the individual soldiers who are contemplating or have been activated for a mission, no surprises to the employers. Let's make sure this works in conjunction with each other, because it's a win-win as far as I can see it. The experience that I've had in the past actually tells me exactly what I just said works. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Look forward to visiting with each and every one of you afterwards. Thank you.